Meeting to order. I'm Commissioner Alexander. I'm sitting in for Commissioner Cooper Comas, who has a scheduled conflict this morning. And I also want to acknowledge that Commissioner Kober will be attending remotely. All right. I'd like to call for a motion and a second to grant a leave of absence to Commissioner Nemi, who is out due to illness.
So moved.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Great, thank you. I'd also like to call for a motion and a second for approval of the minutes of the regular commission meeting of August 10th, 2022.
So moved.
Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Great, thank you. All right. I'd like to now ask Curtis if he will offer his executive director's report and any remarks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, court staff and guests. Really nice to see everyone in person. I'll note that yesterday we had our first anchor day where the employees here in headquarters were here in person, and at least I thought it was great. I'm not sure if all the employees thought it was great, but we had a great barbecue and churros and a lot of in-person sort of, oh, look who it is. I remember you. It was fantastic. And honestly, one of the things I'm noting is a bunch of new employees who I haven't met. And so it was really great to put names to faces and really say hi to people who haven't been in the office for a couple years. So it was just really great. In the category of very good news, hopefully all of you saw, we were awarded last week the EDA $41 million grant for our Terminal 2 project on mass timber. Really exciting news. The team, Keith's team, actually teams across the port worked on this project for nearly a year. It was just extraordinary. A couple hundred applicants in the first round, down to 60 in the second round, and 21 awardees. Keith participated with President Biden via Zoom call, I believe, from the Rose Garden, but we're just really thrilled and thrilled with our partners to move forward at Terminal 2 was just really great news. Another piece of great news was the award of the Center of Innovation Excellence. Did I get that right, Keith? From Business Oregon, essentially a designation for the Oregon Mass Timber Coalition to proceed and some funding to move down the road of moving innovation into this space and having Oregon be a hub for that work. So really excited about that as well. On a different but not unrelated topic, I note I'm really too close or too far away here. Apologies, everyone. I got to participate earlier this week in the Cascadia Summit with former Governor Gregoire, Premier of British Columbia, a number of regional guests speaking about climate up in Bellingham, and essentially trying to get a British Columbia, Oregon, Washington approach. I was really excited to participate in particular around sustainable aviation fuel. Our own team in operations has spent a lot of time trying to figure out how we can help airlines get more sustainable aviation fuel into their fuel mix. It's hard. We essentially enter with infrastructure and are trying to help move that forward. But currently, depending on where you're buying the fuel, sustainable aviation fuel is between 2 and 6 times as expensive as jet fuel. So it's a big hurdle to get over. It's going to require some policy changes, but also some operational changes. And our team has been just great. I got to appear on a panel with the head of Vancouver Airport and Seattle Tacoma, the airport, but also port director. We had a really good conversation. I'm going to ask them to come down and meet, see if we can work together to essentially identify a source for sustainable aviation fuel that we can all agree on and bring some buyer power to that space. So really excited about that work as well. I'm especially thrilled to look out at the executive team and move down the road to see our new executive team member, Myra Arreola, who's joined us. Thank you, Commissioner, in particular, for your help on the recruitment and selection process. We had a very robust search, including community members, employees, Commissioner Alexander, to hire, essentially helping us with the work. The position is diversity and social impact So Myra will be helping us integrate our shared prosperity objectives into everything we do, but also help lead the effort internally on diversity and inclusion for our own employees. I'm just really thrilled to have Myra here. It's her third day. So I think I've told the story too many times, but I spent a couple weeks wandering around trying to figure out where my desk was. So I know it's an exciting time. And I hope employees in particular get the chance to drop by and say hi to Myra. She's fantastic, and we're just really happy to have you with us, Myra. And then finally, you'll hear a little bit more about it later from Vince and his team. But I do want to note we have begun moving the roof parts into place. The movement has been done safely, and I'll get to our safety champions in just a second. But I'm just thrilled to note that these 20-odd pieces of football stadium-sized roof are moving into place. The team has really been working hard at it. It takes place at night, and so it's stretching both the capacity to do the work safely, but also to manage your hours. And so I'm really grateful to the team for everything they're doing and excited that you'll get a chance to hear about that later. Stan, if you would, and maybe we could switch the slide to acknowledge our safety champions there we are. I do want to note again, folks across the organization really leaning in from maintenance to fire and throughout the organization, leaning into safety and thinking about their own safety and their coworkers' safety. And I do want to acknowledge them today. Stan, I wonder if you have a safety message for us today.
Certainly. My message today focuses on PDX airport safety in advance of the Airports Council International North American Conference in Minneapolis. I invite all Port of Portland Conference attendees to have safety conversations with their peers using the information in this safety message to benchmark and compare our airport safety program and statistics with other airport operators. We are extremely pleased to report the following. PDX Operations has operated for over 2 years without an OSHA recordable injury. PDX Maintenance has operated for over 1 year without an OSHA recordable injury. Our general aviation airports have operated without an OSHA recordable injury for over 5 years. Port of Portland headquarters has not had an OSHA recordable injury for over 3 years. Port Fire has not had an acute injury in over 2 years. However, Port Fire has recognized 5 cases of chronic illness within the last year, and these were just a threshold shift and some hearing loss. Port Police have experienced just 3 OSHA recordable injuries over the last year. So to sum up on trailing indicators using the last 12 months of exposure hours and OSHA recordable incidents, the airport's operations, maintenance, fire, police, and headquarters support have a total recordable incident rate of 1.43. Our Director of Safety, Health, and Loss Control suggests that rate to be the lowest of airports in North America. Further, our TCORE construction project has been exceptionally safe with a total recordable incident rate of 1.27 for the last 12 months. Safety conversations on injury rates at airports is fairly limited, so we are asking staff to test our rates against our peers. Are they even measuring this key performance indicator toward operational excellence? We are also asking staff to even dive in further to discuss some of the port's key safety and health program attributes, such as committed and visible leadership, engaged employee involvement, shameless incident reporting and analysis of facts for continuous improvements, hazard reporting enablement with quick response codes, providing stop work authority for all employees, and prevention through design efforts on all construction activities to enable safe facility operations and maintenance, as well as maintain safety for the passenger experience. While we recognize these point-in-time successes, employee safety and health is a continuous improvement journey. We are engaged with all the business units constructing fiscal year 23 safety plans using data analysis, management input, employee involvement, and internal safety consultations. Advancing the awareness that safety is not the absence of injuries. Safety is the presence of resilient defenses. I wish all of our conference participants a great conference, and I thank them in advance for their support. Curtis, that's our message today.
Thank you, Stan. I just want to note, it's not always been this way. This is really exceptional work. I'm very grateful to you and Steve, and honestly, all the safety team, Ellen and David. There are a lot of people doing this work, but also to employees across the organization who are thinking about it every day. I'm just really grateful. When you say best safety performance for airports in North America, that's super meaningful, and I'm just really grateful. So thank you. With that, Mr. President, we'll conclude my remarks this morning.
Great. Thank you very much, Curtis. All right. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, I would ask for a motion and a second to accept the executive director's report.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? None. All right, we'll move on. Have we received requests for public comment?
No, we did not.
All right, hearing none, we will move on. I wanted to ask if any of the commissioners would want a presentation on either of the two consent items on the agenda.
Mr. Chair, good morning. It's Katie Koba, beaming in. I don't request any discussion, but I do need to declare a potential conflict of interest on the amendment to janitorial and pest control services contract. The company that we are contracting with, Relay Resources, is a company that's authorized through the Oregon Forward program, which is administered by the agency that I am the director of, the Department of Administrative Services. The contract would provide no direct benefits to me or to the Department of Administrative Services, so I'm declaring a potential but not actual conflict of interest, and I will participate in the vote. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. So noted. The two items that are listed on the consent agenda are number one, amendment to janitorial and pest control services contract, and this is in support of various Port of Portland facilities. The second item is the designation of the Port of Portland's representative to the Urban Flood Safety and Water Quality District. If there is not a request on the part of any commissioner, I would ask for a motion and a second to approve the consent items.
Second.
All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Thank you very much, commissioners. Well, now I'd like to call on Vince Granato to introduce our first agenda item.
Good morning. George is here with me, and we're going to do a request for an exemption from competitive bidding for a portion of the project that we were able to get some grant funding for. But before we get into that, we thought we'd just give you an update on the construction and what's been going on. There's a lot of really big pieces that have been moving around here for the last couple of weeks, so we thought now's a good time to show you. So I assume somebody else will have, I don't have a mouse, so somebody else will have to move the slides forward, please, if you can get started. Just a reminder on the schedule this year, we'll be installing the roof. The plan is to have it done by the end of this calendar year. And then we'll have about 16 months to build out 400,000 square feet of tenant improvements. That will be an astonishing amount of work in a short period of time. And it's just not that far away from when we open the main terminal in the spring of 2024. So there's a lot that's going to be going on here in the next, obviously, 16 months. I have a countdown clock. We just passed under 600 days left to go. So before we open the building, and then we'll have the full facility open in late 25 after we close the existing nodes and then put the roof over that section. If we can go to the next slide, please. So, and I think this is the first one, it's a video. This was the placement of all of the columns. And this part of the process went really exceptionally well. We ended up about almost a week ahead of schedule. Those round things on the top, those are the seismic isolators that will move up to 2 feet in the event of an earthquake. And so getting the columns in place, that part just went super well. So the shoring towers, that's going to allow for the roof sliding, all that process really went exceptionally well. And I would acknowledge and thanks for Stan's safety comments. Our comment to the team is do it safe first and do it right after that, and make sure those are the two things. Schedule, we'll fix that as it moves along, but we want to make sure everybody's doing it safely. If we can go to the next slide now, and I think there's another video here. So we started moving the roof modules in, and so we have 2 of them in place right now. This is an amazing process to watch, all happening in the middle of the night. We have a very short work window to get to, but they get it into place and then it slides. And you can see some of the jacks there. The first night we moved it 2 feet, and then we moved it 18 feet, and then it went 73 feet the next night after that. So they're on a pretty steep learning curve, but they've really got it all kind of sorted out now in how it's supposed to work. And then the second mod, they slid it 87 feet in the first night. So it only took 2 nights to get it into place. We're basically on schedule right now. It kind of moves a day here, a day there, one way or another, but overall on schedule to that. So you come out and you talk to the team, and the subcontractor is Mammoth. They have done enormous movements of equipment and pieces all around the world. It's the best team in the business here. So we're very confident of their ability to do this. As they say, why don't you bring me something heavy? This stuff, it's big. It's the most beautiful thing they said that they've moved, but it's certainly not the biggest or the heaviest. But so it's really been a fun experience to watch. This was the roof yard before we started to disassemble it. So this was probably in
End of July.
End of July, something like that. If you go to the next slide now, you can see we're pulling pieces apart. So we've got 2 in place. We'll move the 3rd one over Friday night. It's a very large one as well, and it's the one that goes right in the center of the terminal. So the biggest issue we've been dealing with is, and appreciate Dan's patience, is the operational impacts and when do we start, and how do we make sure we're done in time to get the building up and going. Nobody can be underneath the area in a certain fall range once the movement starts and gets close to the building. So we've had to close areas of baggage claim. When we did the second module, we had to close the bypass out to Concourse D and E for a period of time. So we're working closely with the operations team. We've had a little bit of regating of airlines at some point in time, but we should be done now with any regating. There's no more impacts to gates. It's just the bag system. And we've had extra resources on hand to make sure the bags are getting there in a timely basis. So this part of the process is moving along. Again, we've got until the end of this year to get all of these. The top 2 pieces, those are the ones that are the north and the south nodes. Those don't happen until we get into phase 2, which will be after basically be the summer of 24 before we get to those. Next slide, please. So this was what it looked like. This was probably late June, maybe
End of July.
End of July also. Okay, this is what the alley looked like as we were getting some of the shoring towers put in place. And the next slide now should show what it looks like now. So you see all the columns in place, and those pieces in between, those are shoring towers. Those are temporary. So as it slides over the column, it has to have a midpoint stop so that it doesn't bow. It would bow if you were moving it forward. So until it gets to the next column, once it reaches that last column piece, then we bolt it down so it's seismically resilient, and then we go back and demolish and remove the shoring towers. So the first one was the one on the upper left corner, which went over concourse, or sorry, the first one was right at the edge of the north part of the building. And then the second one we put in place that went over Concourse D. So we're out of the way now, and it's really just headed north to south or left to right on the screen as we'll be putting them in place. And next slide from here. So again, these are just some pictures of what these monster pieces look like. You know, when we've been building at 13 feet off the ground, They're now at their elevation, which is 55 feet off of the main floor of the terminal. We'll probably wait to get you all out there until we have more of them in place, and then we'll figure out a way, certainly, to be doing lots of tours. I know everybody's going to want to see it once we have it in place. So I think the next few pictures are just some pictures of the unit itself moving across. Moving from the airfield over the terminal building, it takes about 40 minutes to roll it all the way across. It's one person in a joystick and a guy in a pickup truck. Looks like he's 30 years old. He's just a genius engineer who's watching every one of those wheels, and they're just driving it over. And it's really pretty fast getting it from the airfield over into the terminal. Once it gets there, then every one of those wheels will turn independently, and they're using it just to angle it and slide it and get it perfectly lined up to be on top of the columns and the shoring towers. It's really an amazing operation to watch. I think we have maybe a couple more pictures. If you can go to the next slide. Nope, that was it. So the team's really done a fantastic job to this point in time. Again, we have complete confidence in the construction team. They've got a good plan, a good schedule. I think we're past the gating operation, so it's just the bag system now. And by the end of this year, we should have all of that in place. And then the glass curtain wall will go around it, and then it'll be fully enclosed. Weather will be an issue as we start to turn now. The wind has to only be in certain amounts before it could impact potentially any of the slides. But so far, it's so good. We're right on track to that. So I'll stop there, and then I'll turn it over to George here, and we'll do the exemption from competitive bidding, and we'll take any questions from you.
All right, thanks, Vince. Next slide, please. So today we're asking for approval of an exemption for competitive bidding to allow us to utilize an RFP process to select the contractor for the ground source portion of the TCORE project. As Vince mentioned, we recently received an $18.4 million grant from the federal government as a part of the Build Back Better plan. That came with some hooks, though, that required us to separate that portion of the work out of the TCORE project and have to rebid it as a standalone project with federal requirements, including Buy American Act, Davis-Bacon, and other things. So we pulled that out, and we're asking for an exemption for this portion of the project. Next slide. Vince mentioned a lot of the milestones, try to bring this up kind of every commission meeting. Kind of the one I want to talk about extra, he didn't cover, was we've bid package F.3 and F.4 to market. It's about $160 million. Bids are due the end of September. I want to comment is we got a really good coverage on some early meetings, especially with the small businesses, whereas the last package was bid kind of during the Omicron period of time and really didn't get the coverage we wanted or even the attendance at meetings. So we got a lot better attendance these early meetings. Hopefully that will translate into better participation on the bids. And we'll see that here in the next couple of weeks or so. Next slide. So the ground source system, which we pulled out and we received the federal grant for, our current heating system is through pretty old, inefficient steam boilers located in a central utility plant. What the ground source system does is pulls water out of the sandstone, Troutdale sandstone aquifer about 300 feet or so below the ground, pulls it out from extraction wells, send it through a heat recovery system, which replaces the boilers, and then re-injects the fluid back in the injection wells back into the aquifer. The TCORE project itself will put a couple of boilers in the western expansion because where we're putting the heat recovery plant is where the existing boilers are. So there's a sequencing and a timing that has to occur. Next slide. Next slide, please. Location-wise, if you kind of look outside back behind where we are, the CUP is where the boilers currently exist, where the heat recovery plant will be located at their footprint. The extraction wells are in the used to be grassy area next to the employee parking lot. We've got a lot of our construction trailers right now, and the injection wells are located over by the Sheraton. And that space between really the CUP and the injection wells will be done with directional drilling. If people remember, Central Utility Plant, sorry. Remember the de-icing project about 10 years ago, we directionally drilled under the south runway about 3,800 feet. So here we're only going to be about, I think about 1,800 feet. But one of the challenges is we got to lay that pipe out, and it's getting then pulled into place. So it's going to be laid out on the airfield, which is one of the justifications for an RFP, is the coordination and the difficulty of working around the airfield operations, as well as just a direct low bid we would have potentially used. Next slide, please. So the exemption we're looking at is, the reasoning is the project complexities, the scheduling and coordination, since it's a part of the TCORE project. It's got to be really well coordinated with what everything else we're doing. So we take down the old boilers, we have the new boilers up, and then we get the work done all kind of in a season, so that we can then get the heat recovery system back up and running for the next heating season. Talked about a coordination. We think that by an RFP approach, we can select the correct contractor to build it. It will really increase our small business opportunity. And we think with all that coordination, we'll be able to achieve some substantial cost savings. Next slide, please. From a schedule perspective, how this fits in with the entire project is we'll select a contractor. We should be back to commission by hopefully the November timeframe, because part of the hooks with the grant was we needed to have a contract in place by the end of the year. They'll then bid the contract to the subcontractors. Next summer, we'll start installing the wells. And then by May of 24, when Western Expansion comes up, we can then demolish the Central Utility Plant portion of the boilers, then put the new heat recovery system in and get it all up and running for the next winter. So it's really a very integrated project. We did have a public hearing on this. There were no comments, no attendees on the public hearing. That's one of our requirements. Next slide, please. So the overall budget is about $40 million for the ground source system, which will be pulled out of the TCORE portion of the project. There's actually an amendment that will occur with the Hoffman-Skanska JV to pull this scope out, but will then award another contract to a CMGC firm. It could be the JV, it's a CMGC firm going forward for that scope. The funding for this is through the Airline Cost Center plus the $18.4 million FAA grant. And because it's an FAA required project, there is not necessarily a MWESB goal. There is a DBE goal, and that's a requirement of the FAA grant, and it's been established at 8.5%. Next slide. Staff recommends approval of the executive director's recommendation for the exemption. Any questions?
Great, thank you very much. Yes, questions or comments on the part of Commissioner Howard?
One, I want to applaud you for pulling this out and running through the federal procurement process, and I think and thank our federal government partners for $18.4 million in opportunity for this that we would not otherwise have had. So I'm impressed by what you have to do and the scope of the work, but also applaud you for your resourcefulness on finding the federal grant and applying for it and making sure that we're going through the right steps to receive the grant. So that's just my comment, not really a question.
Thank you very much. Other questions or comments from Commission?
I just want to say thanks for sharing those pictures. I know it's very hard work, but and difficult work. And thanks for selecting the right team for the job. That's hard. So congratulate on that. Also, continue to share us the timeline. That's very helpful because every month, every year, it seems that we've forgotten what we've the last time. So please continue to do that. So thanks, Vince, for your leadership. Thanks, George.
I think this might be the 27th approval for the project, something like that, in that range.
Curtis thought it was 21, but
No.
yeah. No, it's been a long path, a long journey, but even in walking through the terminal, I can begin to see sort of the transformation, and it's exciting. It's exciting. You never want to rush your life, but I do want to see time pass quickly in this next 600 days so that we can begin to live in this new space. So thank you. At this point, I am going to ask for recess briefly in the Board of Commissioners meeting and call into order the Portland Contract Review Board so that we can entertain a motion to approve the recommendation. So we will suspend the Commissioners meeting. We will call the Contract Review Board to order, and I would call for a motion and a second for approval of the findings in support of exemption and approval to exempt from competitive bidding the PDX next ground source heat pump system. That was a mouthful. All right, there's a motion.
Second.
Second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Noting none. The measure is passed and it has been approved by the board. All right, I would now like to call the meeting of the commissioners back to order, and we will move on to our next agenda item. At this point, I would like to ask if Dan Pippinger would come forward and lead us through this next piece.
Good morning, Commissioners. This item before you is about our compressed natural gas fueling facility. It will be presented by Janelle Brennan, who is an engineering project manager. This project is an asset renewal, and Janelle will get into that, but I did want to point out that 26 years ago, the port went to compressed natural gas for our fleet of buses and some maintenance vehicles. And since then, we've moved to clean, renewable natural gas. And that has a benefit over diesel of 99% less fine particulate matter, 80% less ozone forming pollutants. And that's a big deal. And we've been doing it for 26 years. But it's time to renew the asset, and Janelle's going to talk to you about that.
Good morning. Good to see everyone. Next slide, please. Today, I'm requesting approval of the public improvement contract to Stellar J Corporation in the amount of just under $1 million for the CNG fuel compressor replacement project. Next slide, please. The compressed natural gas fueling station is located at the PDX maintenance facility and is the fueling source for PDX's fleet of 32 shuttle buses and 20 maintenance vehicles. This project will remove and replace the CNG compressor at the fueling station. Additionally, a temporary fueling station will be installed for the shuttle buses and maintenance vehicles to maintain service. Next slide, please. Here we see two photos of the existing natural gas compressor. It looks like one of the containers, and it's roughly the size of one of our shuttle buses. The scope of this work will remove and replace the CNG compressor, the associated electrical, natural gas, and controls work, and the installation of a temporary fueling station. Next slide, please. Design of this project was completed in April, and with Commission's approval today, construction will begin later this year. Next slide, please. The total budget of this project is just over $1.5 million. The funding source for this project is the Port's Cost Center Fund. The public improvement contract for approval today is just under $1 million. The contingency of this project is at 18%, which is reasonable given the risk profile and complexity of the scope of work. The small business goal was set at 5%, and the responsive low bidder, Stellar J, proposed a goal of 6.2 SBE participation. Next slide, please. Staff requests approval of the executive director's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from commission?
This is not a question directly about the proposal, but more of a long-term roadmap or horizon, which is, does the bus fleet, or when does the bus fleet move to either EV or hybrid? And, how does that look like? And, what does it mean for this asset?
Thank you, Commissioner. A great question. We certainly are looking at electrification of all of our equipment. Right now, we're focused on the ground support equipment by the airlines on the ramp area. But we did do an analysis of how long we would keep these buses and keep the CNG station. We'll continue to use CNG even if we move the buses, since we have a lot of maintenance vehicles also. So I think the investment is worth it, but our long-term plan is to electrify the whole fleet.
Thank you. We look forward to seeing the long-term plan.
Move to approve the executive director's recommendation.
One quick question that I did want to ask. In looking at the bid responses, there were 3 responses. This was not the lowest bid, but you characterized it as the lowest responsive bid. Was there something in the lower bid that lent itself to be not selected?
No, it was the low bid. It was just the wording I was given. So I apologize for the mischaracterization there. It was the lowest bid.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, I believe we had a motion. Was there a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Noting none, the motion carries. All right, Dan, I would ask if you would stay in place there and take us through our last agenda item.
Our next agenda item is relative to amending an ordinance. This is really about defining peer-to-peer car rentals, which you may have heard of, where somebody rents their personal car to another person, usually through an app. Defining those as rental car activity at the airport, and also authorizing that activity through permit to the port, and then exempting them from the customer facility charge, which the commission approved a number of years ago for the construction and maintenance of the quick turnaround facility, the P3 parking garage rental car, and the part of the rental car center that's related to those activities, since the peer-to-peer services will not use those facilities. So here to present the item is Steve Kester. He's the interim senior manager of landside and commercial operations for PDX.
Good morning. Good morning. Next slide, please. So our action this morning is a first reading and public hearing for the Port of Portland Ordinance number 478R and amend Port Ordinance number 448 regarding customer facility charges, CFCs, on rental car transactions at PDX. Next slide. Ordinance number 478R is in response to the growth of the peer-to-peer vehicle sharing companies that are a relatively new option for renting vehicles throughout the United States and here in Portland. Avail and Turo are 2 of the more commonly known companies. They operate on a online and app-based platform. And while these companies do not have a physical presence at PDX, they do compete directly with companies who do have a physical presence at PDX and have an operating agreement to do so. Next slide. And again, these peer-to-peer companies are operating at PDX today, but they do not have a permit at this time. It's been challenging to track their activities because they do operate online. Typically, the customer rents the vehicle online, the company drops the vehicle off at the airport, and then the customer picks it up and exits out the plaza. Our existing Ordinance 448 requires rental car companies at PDX to collect a customer facility charge, CFC, from customer transactions and then remit those fees back to the port. But the peer-to-peer companies are not collecting or remitting these CFC funds, but they're also not using the CFC funded facilities such as the rental car center and the quick turnaround. In the last couple of years, a number of airports have begun entering into operating agreements with the peer-to-peer companies to allow them to operate on site. Typically, these agreements allow the companies a designated area inside the parking facility, and in return, they pay a percentage of revenue. Next slide, please. So Ordinance 478R will amend Ordinance 448 to define vehicle sharing companies as rental car companies. It will eliminate the CFC on rental car transactions conducted at off-site airport facilities. These off-site airport facilities will not be contiguous or adjacent to the airport terminal building, such as the rental car center. They will not be funded by CFC funds, and they will be designated by areas designated by the port. Essentially, what 478R does is enable support to develop and enter into operating agreements with the peer-to-peer companies. It will continue to prohibit their use of CFC-funded facilities, and it will generate port revenue and allow us to govern how they operate here at the airport so they can offer their services to the customers. Next slide. So our next steps is we're here today to do a first reading and public hearing. We'll finalize our ordinance. We'll be back again in October of 2022 for a second reading, be effective November 11th. And then we'll spend the rest of this calendar year and into next year developing a permit and working with the companies that have them operate here at PDX. Next slide. And our recommendation is a call for first reading of ordinance number 478R, amending Port of Portland Ordinance number 448 regarding customer facility charges on rental car transactions at Portland International Airport, and conduct a public hearing.
Thank you. Questions?
Thank you. First of all, I just want to commend you for trying to think creatively around a very difficult problem to solve. I know we had some discussions, and even knowing that this activity is going on, the shared economy is not going away. And I think by actively engaging in supporting really innovation in the marketplace, because I think my view is that this is going to continue to innovate, but trying to monetize that to support the operations of the airport is really important. So just commend you for leaning into that and trying to find creative ways to engage and enter into operating agreements. I think that's really important. I was just interested if you had, and I know this is difficult, but any sense of the scale of the business that's operating now, whether you think in the time continuum this is early days, or how mature do you think this activity is happening, and what kind of timeline do you believe that it would take to get an operating agreement in place? Thanks.
I think we get the agreement in place by spring. Hopefully some at the latest. Didn't take too long, but these are steps. So hopefully by spring. We've already been talking to some of the companies in the last couple of years. They've talked to us, so they know we're trying to get something put together for them. So I think they're anxious and willing to sign an agreement so they can be here and not working under the table, so to speak. As far as the size, it's hard to know. I mean, they started off in 2017, 2018, and 19, and then it dropped off the last couple of years with activity levels. And it's picked back up again. We really don't have a good handle, other than we know we get 2 or 3 times a week. We have customers who come by and ask us looking for their car. That's generally how we find out about it.
Another related question to this. Are there other airports around the country that have sort of set the benchmark of good operating agreements?
Yeah, we have a couple examples that we've looked at that will probably mirror ours after. Like I said, we'll probably designate an area in one of our parking facilities for them to operate so they can put their vehicles there and customers will know where to go. And then there is in return, you do a percentage of revenue.
And which facilities, I mean, which other airports are you specifically looking at?
We've looked at one at Salt Lake City and Dallas has one as well. And I've heard there's a few others out there now.
Thank you.
Can you clarify what CFC means?
Or it's the customer facility charge.
Okay. And can you explain the limited circumstances?
Of the CFC?
Yeah.
Yeah, right now it's charged against customers who rent vehicles at PDX for I believe it's the first 10 days of their transaction. And it's the money's used to fund the facilities that we built.
So the company we're talking about more like Turo kind of services?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I think this is more services to our passengers. So I really think that, I think I support us, moving forward with this one. Thank you.
Is there anyone from the public who would like to be heard on this? We'll make sure that the public hearing is available as well. All right. Not hearing them. Stephen, could I ask you to read the ordinance by title only?
And so ordinance number 478R, an ordinance amending ordinance number 448 of the Port of Portland regarding customer facility charges on rental car transactions at the airport.
Great, thank you. We've offered public hearing. Having none, we will close that, and I will indicate that there's no action required at this time, but this action will be back to commission for the second reading at our October 12th meeting. All right, I thank you all. Thank you very much, gentlemen. All right, having no agenda items remaining, we are closed. All right.